Here on the Kelly File, we have an exclusive tonight with Senator Rand Paul, his upcoming speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference this week, which is better known as CPAC. He has won the event's straw poll, what many call a barometer of the Republican Party, for the last 2 years in a row. Winning a third time this year would put him in a category that is shared by the likes of Ronald Reagan and Mitt Romney. Earlier, I spoke with the potential 2016 Republican candidate. Here's that. Senator, good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Martha. Thanks for having me.
So what do you expect? What can we hear from you at this conference? What are you going to be telling everybody?
Well, you know, this is a group that's dominated by young people, and I'll say what I always say. The government ought to leave us alone. Let us be free to live our lives. The government ought to be minimal, and your liberty ought to be maximized.
Well, you know that's going to get a good response because it has for you in the past. It's a message that resonates with young people. And no doubt you're going to have a lot of competition from Jeb Bush and from others who are out there that are ranking higher than you in most of the polls that we've seen. Why do you think that Jeb Bush is getting so much attention?
Well, being related when your brother had been president and your father president, that tends to draw some attention. But I think it'll be, you know, it's a kind of a difficult crowd out here because this is going to be the Conservative Political Action Committee. So we think there'll be a lot of friendly faces for us, and there's definitely a place for moderates, but it may not be quite the same level of enthusiasm for moderates at this conference. Yeah,
when you look at this race, I think, you know, it's likely, and in fact, it would be kind of a disappointment and a surprise if you didn't win this straw poll, right?
Well, you never know till after the poll's done, but we have spent a lot of time going to universities, talking to young people, talking about how really the government ought to stay out of their lives, that their phone records are none of the government's business. So we'll see. We think the message resonates, but I think it'd be crazy to predict anything in advance.
So Scott Walker's getting a lot of attention. He's had a good couple of weeks, made a lot of headlines. He's seen as someone who is rising in the ranks of the potential 2016 candidates. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, I like what he did in Wisconsin with fighting to take away excessive power from the unions and give the power back to the workers. And I think there are many things he's done well. We'll decide over time, I guess, who can best portray and present the message. But I don't, know Scott Walker enough to say anything more than I think some of the things he did in Wisconsin were good.
Yeah. I know that you say you have to have the base of the Republican Party, and you also have to expand it to other groups. You've spent a lot of time trying to do that with young people. How do you think Jeb Bush will do in that part of this race in terms of expanding the base?
I think if you talk to young people, they're not very tolerant of hypocrisy. And the fact that Jeb admits that when he was in an elite prep school where very wealthy kids went to school that he smoked pot, but he's still willing to put somebody in jail for medical marijuana in Florida. You know, a 75-year-old guy using marijuana for multiple sclerosis, I frankly wouldn't put them in jail. And a lot of poor people go to jail for drug offenses. And when Jeb was a very wealthy kid at a very elite school, he used marijuana but didn't get caught, didn't have to go to prison. I think it shows some hypocrisy that's going to be difficult for young people to understand why we'd put a 65-year-old guy in jail for medical marijuana.
I mean, do you think it's fair to make an issue of the wealth thing? I mean, shouldn't we be happy for people, for families when they succeed in this country?
Yeah, it's not wealth. I'm all for wealth, and I have no problem with people being successful. I did nothing but compliment Governor Romney for being wealthy. What I'm talking about, though, is not the hypocrisy of wealth. It's the hypocrisy of evading the law, because the law seems to target and seems to go after poor people, often people of color. 3 out of 4 people in jail are black or brown. So the war on drugs has had a disproportionate effect on the poor. But what's hypocritical is if you're very wealthy and you are able to escape the long arm of the law, is then to want to really throw the long sentences, 15 years, 20 years, 50 years in prison for marijuana at people. And so I think that's where the hypocrisy comes in.
All right, quick question before I let you go. It looks like as many as 200 Assyrians were kidnapped by ISIS. We're still waiting for an AUMF from Congress on this war. What do you think should happen next to battle this? Many say the president's sitting idly by while these people are being, in many cases, massacred and in this case, kidnapped.
In December, I introduced a declaration of war against ISIS. If my declaration of war were to pass, it'd be the first time we declared war since World War II. We do have to do something militarily. The way the president's doing it now is illegal and unconstitutional and doesn't bring the country together. It doesn't show leadership, and it's the wrong way to go.
Do we need boots on the ground to fight ISIS ultimately, as so many military professionals say?
Yeah, I think we do need boots on the ground, and I'd like to make sure that they're Arab boots on the ground. I don't think that ultimately you can command and control a city like Mosul of 1.5 million people that's primarily Sunni if you're going to have it occupied by either Shiites or Christians. This coalition has to involve Sunnis, and there need to be Sunni boots on the ground. I'd just soon have 10,000 Saudi Arabians at the front of every brigade, and they need to stand up and say, look, we're going to fight now for civilized Islam, because frankly, the Saudi Arabians haven't been very helpful.
You think that's going to happen, and you think the president's done enough to make that happen?
I don't think the president's been very good at that. And I do think that when you look at the first George Bush, I think he was very good at coalition building, and even the second George Bush. Second George Bush brought the war resolutions to Congress before he went to war. That's the way it's supposed to work. So there's a lot to be said that Republicans have done a better job in the past at leading the country. This president, his uncertainty and indecisiveness has not made him a very good leader.
All right, Senator, thank you very much. We'll watch for you and the others at CPAC this week. Good to talk to you tonight.
Thank you.
Well, still to